It's time for the third leg.
The third leg.
I can hardly wait. Is that going to be a third switch joke?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay. The third leg of the actual regatta, the mountain run. Captain Dampf's spirits were not quite as high as usual that night at Innsbruck as they sat drinking lagers at Bierwart. Despite the Birkenhair's win that day, the Iron Eagle was still leading, but by a maddeningly thin margin of 47 seconds. Although Dampf had managed to hang on to the first place flag, it was McTrowell's hand Emperor Franz Joseph had shaken first. And it would be her picture on the front page of the broadsheets the next day. It was not a particularly proud day for the German Confederation. However, by comparison to the Spanish and French situation, it was positively festive. Of course, Le Lapin was out of the race, being damaged beyond repair. The only saving grace was the drag of El Toro Rojo had slowed its descent sufficiently that no one had been injured, unless one counted Pierre Dugard's pride. He had screamed to the judge and referees for a full 20 minutes about the scandale of the whole thing, but there was really no point. His ship was ruined. Senor Garza had screamed for another 20 minutes about the gross unfairness of being disqualified since Dugard had obviously caused the incident. There was really no point to his display either because everyone else had clearly seen that it was his fault. Honor, sportsmanship, and international relations left no room for any action besides the Spanish entry's complete disqualification. Drake sat at Sparky's elbow performing his beer-sipping charade and paying more attention to the crowd around them than the conversation. Sergeant Fox sat by himself near the door performing the same act, but somehow sitting at attention. Although they were now well out of Munich, they were taking no chances given the boldness of the gypsies. Between the sentry duty and Dampf's doldrums, their evening out didn't last long, nor did Dampf do his usual damage to the establishment's stores of beer. Sparky suspected that, like herself, he was planning for the next day's leg to Vaduz Liechtenstein, for which he wanted to be fresh and restored. It was barely dark when they all headed back to their respective ships. Drake McTrowell strolled back to the airship field with Sergeant Fox trailing behind like a Chinese wife, but with his head held high, on alert for any danger. As they approached the mooring tower, a figure separated from the shadow. Dr. McTrowell was all the figure managed to utter before Drake tackled it and Fox cinched it into a headlock. In the earnest wrestling that ensued, the would-be assailant's face flashed under the light of the lantern mounted on the tower, and Drake recognized him. Mr. Fremont! Drake and Fox stopped in the middle of pinning Aldrich Fremont with his hands behind his back. Bloody hell, what's the meaning of this insult? Fremont struggled to his feet and straightened his clothes with umbrage. Drake dusted himself off and replaced his bowler firmly on his head. I am terribly sorry, Mr. Fremont. We mistook you for a miscreant who intended to do violence to Dr. McTrowell. Please accept my apologies, Drake offered. I only wish to congratulate the good doctor on her brilliant win today. He huffed and glared at Drake and Fox. Thank you, Mr. Fremont, although it was a testament to the ability of the entire crew to work together. I'm hoping tomorrow will be just as successful. To that end, I think all of us could use a good night's sleep. She fixed Drake and Fox with a meaningfully stony stare before heading up the tower. McTrowell was making her way to the bridge the next morning when Aldrich approached her again, looking around cautiously for her guard dogs before getting close. Hello again, Dr. McTrowell. Good morning, Mr. Fremont. She dearly hoped he would get to the point quickly because she hadn't much time to finish preparations for the day's leg. She gave him her best, I'm in a hurry, so get on with it look. That chief inspector. Yes? Clearly she needed to spend time brushing up on her repertoire of meaningful looks. He's quite prickly. Excuse me? Quite stuffy and full of himself. I can't imagine why that good Mr. Wallace allows his presence on this airship. Don't you agree? Uh-huh. I really must get to work. She tried her, aren't you lucky you inherited something valuable because you haven't the wits to come in from the rain look. It had no more discernible effect than the get on with it look. Yes, when this was over, she really needed to find a good mirror and put in some practice time. Dobrое утро, Mr. Krasnaya Rubashka. Are you ready for another day of adventure? Da, госпожа Dr. Yochika McTrowell. Flying with you is always big excitement. This mountain run is going to be tricky because I don't know where the updrafts will be, and we'll be going over too many peaks to risk making a critically wrong guess on them. It's valley from here over Zurl to Telfs. My plan is to tail the Iron Eagle as closely as possible without getting penalized for drafting. Dampf knows these mountains, so he'll make good decisions almost everywhere, and we'll follow his lead, closely. When he makes a mistake, we'll correct course before we make the same one. But госпожа Dr. Yochika McTrowell, how will we win if we follow all the way? We will conserve fuel by staying on the optimal course. When we get over Bludenz, we'll make an all-out run for it. Are you sure you're not descended from Genghis Khan or Ivan Grozny? She only smiled at him. When the starting gun fired, Sparky counted slowly to 5 before opening the throttle gently, while Krasnaya Rubashka lifted the flaps to fall in behind the Iron Eagle. She rested her hand lightly on the throttle, carefully keeping the Birkenhair out of the turbulence of the Iron Eagle. As Zurl came into view below, she spotted the first mate of the Iron Eagle making his way around the outside of the gondola. He glanced up at the north wind that was taking the high road, but obviously Dampf was no more worried about it than Sparky was. The first mate glared at the Birkenhair in the Iron Eagle's wake and scurried back to the bridge. No sooner than he disappeared from view than Herr Fenstermacher appeared on the bridge of the Birkenhair. He pulled out his telescope, studied each edge of the envelope of the Iron Eagle, made some numerical notes and calculations in his notebook, and checked the time on his pocket watch. But he said nothing. After a period of time that Sparky estimated to be 10 minutes, Fenstermacher pulled out his pocket watch and stared at it for several seconds. He snapped it shut, pulled out his telescope, and repeated his scanning, note-taking, and calculation activity. But this time he said something. Fräulein McTrowell, you are dangerously close to being called drafting. How dangerously close? She never took her eyes off the Iron Eagle. 3.5 yards too close. Sparky closed the throttle very slowly to back off from the Iron Eagle before establishing a position she judged to be 4 yards farther behind it. Fenstermacher remained on the bridge for a few more minutes before departing without a word. The door clicked closed, and Sparky opened the throttle very slowly, making sure to maintain this distance. When she returned to her previously established speed behind the Iron Eagle, she heard Krasnaya Rubashka chuckle softly. Play to win, she smiled back. No sooner had they passed over Telfs than the Iron Eagle began to take evasive maneuvers, trying to shake the Birkenhair off its tail. McTrowell remained steadfast without wasting fuel to follow Dampf's contortions. The dance became more frantic as they passed Lech. Both McTrowell and Dampf knew there was less than an hour left in the leg, and letting the more maneuverable Birkenhair pass would give away the lead. As a result, the stretch between Lech and Bludenz was uneventful while Dampf attempted to conserve fuel. McTrowell sent Krasnaya Rubashka aft to check the progress of the north wind. By blazing his own path, Swenson had put himself at sufficient disadvantage to not be a contender in the mountain leg. Coming up on him from below didn't work last time, Mr. Krasnaya Rubashka. We're going to come down on him from above this time. She grabbed the voice pipe. Gentlemen, double up in the boilers. We're about to burn up all the fuel we've saved. She turned to her co-pilot. Flaps up, Mr. Krasnaya Rubashka. Flaps up. She opened up the throttle 3/4 of the way, angling the Birkenhair upward at a precarious angle, amusingly similar to the broadsheet Wallace had shown her the day he finagled her into this mess. She opened up the throttle the rest of the way, shooting over the top of the Iron Eagle. She knew she was counting on the element of surprise because her faster opponent would win if she didn't get ahead of him before he saw it coming. Flaps down, Mr. Krasnaya Rubashka. Flaps down. They cut in front of the Iron Eagle as closely as possible without bumping, and Sparky held the throttle wide open. She wondered if the Iron Eagle's referee was lecturing Captain Dampf about drafting. Vadou's castle rose into view. It was a straight shot, and the throttle was wide open, so there was nothing for Sparky to do but keep an eye out and take deep breaths to calm her jangling nerves. Suddenly, out of the corner of her eye, she spotted the tip of the Iron Eagle's envelope coming up on the starboard side. Damn, she thought. The engines couldn't put out anymore, and the finish line was from the ground to the stars. So climbing or descending would only contribute to a greater loss. It was all over except for the sulking and second-guessing. She glanced at Yvonne, who was also looking starboard and whose expression was as disappointed as hers. The two of them scanned back and forth sullenly between the advancing Iron Eagle and the finish line. On her fourth or fifth check on the Iron Eagle, she thought it looked like it had receded. Yvonne had a look of surprise on his face that suggested he had seen the same thing. They both registered the shared hope on their faces. They turned to the starboard. Is that left or right?
Starboard.
Okay. They stared to the starboard. They watched the tip of the Iron Eagle disappear out of view behind them. It was quite literally running out of steam. It worked! Krasnaya Rubashka yelped. He slapped Sparky hard on the shoulder. Throttle, Yvonne! Throttle! Oh, da! He replied sheepishly as she steadied her shaking hand. She was holding her breath as they crossed the finish line. A cheer went up in the common room and she let out her breath. She turned and shook Krasnaya Rubashka's hand vigorously. Please take her down, Yvonne. Okay. Whew. So,
that's the end?
That's the end of the mountain run. So, stay tuned for more episodes of the Bavarian Airship Regatta on Corona Story Time with Drake and McTrowell. Thanks for tuning in.